the thing that we would like to chat about today is mental health and the stigma that it has, attached to it. But I think most importantly, it is starting the conversation and debunking and, creating the awareness of, yes, there might be this mental aspect, but there's a solution, there's a way forward. And I think that's the most important thing to communicate. And so I'd like to start off this conversation purely based on my own experience. And so we've sort of spoken about it. And so when I had COVID, it came at a very convenient time for me, because I noticed when I had COVID, I was quite mentally fatigued. I felt I was mentally drained. And so when I had COVID, I was like, oh, thank goodness. Almost like thank goodness, because I felt like I needed to have a break. And I realized that when I felt mentally drained, there was a direct link to my immune system. My immune system became weaker, and as a result, I actually got COVID and all the symptoms thereafter. And so that's where I'd like to speak about. It is okay to feel mentally fatigued at times. It is okay to feel as if you are restrained, or you just have nowhere to go mentally. And so just from your experience, what you've seen and what you've noticed, what have you noticed, and how do you think we could start to resolve an issue like this, just from your experience?
So in our case, both sides. My mother has the mental health illness as well. So really like you always tell me, the thing is, meet them where they're at. Listen to what they're saying, and actually not just try and find a solution immediately for them. Let them figure out that, they need to figure out where their solution needs to go. They need to take charge of, I do have a problem. It's okay to have a problem. It's okay to be where I'm at, and it's okay to go and get help. Because the biggest thing is, people are not comfortable going and getting help. So with the physical...
Why is that? Why is it that you feel people don't want to get help?
Because people feel they're going to be judged. You won't be judged if you lost your leg because it was an accident. But somehow they feel when it becomes to the mental aspect, it's a bigger thing. It's like, why can you not just think for yourself? It's like, why? It's like the mind is not part of the body. It's like the mind's supposed to function on its own, and the body must function on its own. So if the body is good, then the mind's supposed to be good. But that not necessarily. The body may look good, but mentally that person might be broken. Look at people that have anorexia and bulimia. We look at them, we're like, oh, they're so slim, they're looking so good. But every day, mentally, they're finishing themselves, throwing up their food because they can't cope.
And I think that's true, because like we sort of discussed, people are more than happy to disclose that they have bodily issues. And oh, look at my knee, or look at my foot, look at my elbow, I have back pain, hip pain. When it comes to the mental aspect, we tend to shy away because we're afraid of the judgment. And I can confidently say that judgment seems to be judgment from other people, but there's a deeper truth, and the judgment actually comes from ourselves, because we think that we are not supposed to have this mental issue. How dare I have this? It means that I'm weak. We assign this label of I'm weak, I'm not sure of who I am, and so there's this negative connotation to the mental illness. And that's the biggest concern, is when we change that narrative, and like you said, accept that this is where I'm at, and where I'm at is actually where I'm supposed to be, not meaning that I accept I'm supposed to be in pain all the time, but this is the reality of the fact.
Yes.
And when you work from that place of acceptance, then do you actually start to include and find solutions. But the minute you shy away and I cannot go to a psychologist, I can't go to a life coach because of the stigma attached to it, which we place on ourselves, you're never going to find a solution to it.
And then that's because the word mental is part of mental health. If it was just to say your emotional well-being, if people were to use the word instead of mental health, if they said your emotional well-being, people wouldn't really be like, okay, fine, it's a mental problem. It would be an emotional problem. So maybe also the words we're using is the words that's affecting people to say, how's your mental health? And they'll be like, but why are you talking about my mental health? My mental health is fine. Because we don't ask you, how is you? Physical health is physical health. But if there was a different word, a more of a negative word associated with physical health, people wouldn't speak about it.
Yeah.
Or how's your chronic illness? They don't want to know about it. So how's your physical illness? People don't want it to be a physical illness. Rather, how's your physical health? So maybe if we don't use the word mental health and we use the word emotional well-being, maybe people will be more open to speaking actually about how they're feeling internally, which is part of their mental health.
And again, absolutely, because, I think we've been indoctrinated, or not indoctrinated, but we've been accustomed to certain ways of talking. And unfortunately, when people speak about mental illness and mental this and that, immediately we go to that negative connotation of you're crazy, and also we become identified by our minds more so than anything else. And so if you speak about my body, it's okay. You can say that I'm fat. Yes, it might affect me, but but if you say that I'm mentally unstable, if you say I'm mentally, that really affects people quite a bit. And so I think you're absolutely right. Starting to change the narrative and saying your mental well-being. How are you emotionally? How are you feeling? But that changing the language, I think, can be quite important. You're absolutely right. And so, is there anything else that you think that can be done and should be done with regards to this whole thing?
From the perspective of somebody listening to the person who's affected emotionally or mentally, whatever the case may be, just being there. Sometimes just sitting there and just listening, they don't make sense for the most part. It makes absolutely no sense. But sometimes they feel that, somebody is actually just listening to me. I think that's a big thing, just sitting and listening now. You don't have a solution. We're not trained to be psychologists and psychiatrists, and we can't be dishing out medication because you have anxiety or because you're having a panic attack. We can sit and listen, and you can maybe try and understand what it is, and maybe just talking. Maybe they talk, and that's their way of expressing how they're feeling.
Absolutely.
And accepting what's going on, and maybe, like you say, hearing yourself out loud speak about how you feel already starts to figure out ways, like solutions for how you're feeling.
100%. And that's the way that we run the practice here. We allow people to talk and express themselves, and even if it's trivial things, but allowing them to really just speak. Because I think, like you said, when people are ashamed, or if they are not given the opportunity to express and just to talk, and there's a level of weight that they hold onto. It's like you're carrying this burden, and the minute you speak of it, the minute you release it, the weight and the burden is actually lifted off. And it helps that we're strangers to them, because it's difficult to speak to someone that is familiar and to lay out your dirty laundry. It's because you want to save face, you want to look good in front of people that you love, and so it's quite difficult. So as a practitioner, you and I, we should use it to our benefit, and this is for all practitioners. This is for everyone who is in a field that works with people, and in the field of helping and healing, that you want to be able to create that space just for people to speak it, for people to speak their heart, and it doesn't, and like we said, just meet them where they're at, and if whatever it is that they speak on, allow them to speak on that. There is no fast way, there is no fixed way to do it, but allow them to speak, and and see the transformation happen as they speak, because it is literally a burden being lifted off the minute we speak. And I think that's quite important. Is there anything else that you think also that can be done in terms of family? This someone that could be watching this, they might have a family member that is going through something, what do you think they can do, just to lessen the burden for that loved one? Is there anything like that?
So speaking of family, it can be two ways. So immediate family, so I'm going to go immediate and extended, right? So immediate being your children, your spouse, right? I'm not talking your brothers, your sisters, because even though that is immediate, it's like not immediate. Immediate has to understand what you're going through, and somehow not always see you, okay, especially in terms of a mother, you always see them as the strong person and that pillar of strength. But sometimes they break. Everybody breaks, and you can't expect them to just change back to who they were. Give them time, help them understand what they're going through. But it also comes from the person who has the mental illness or who's going through something, to be able to recognize they're going through something. And yes, sometimes you need a psychologist to help you with that. Sometimes you need a family member. But then you get the external influences, which is like your brothers, your sisters, your friends, and whoever, who somehow may have your well-being at heart, but it's not helping the situation. It's actually making your situation worse, because they're coming up with ridiculous ideas on what's the way forward, and it's not going to benefit you in the long run. It's not solving the problem. You think it's solving the problem. You think maybe the place where you're in is where your issue is. Maybe true, that is where your issue is, if that's where you're saying it is. But if it's emotionally, if you're going to other places and you still have the same pattern of behavior, look deeper. Don't just say, okay, it's where you're staying, or it's your children, or it's this, or it's that. Don't blame things. Say, okay, how do you feel? Tell us how you're feeling. What do you think is the problem? Because only that person that's experiencing it can say, what is the actual problem? They may not make sense in what they're saying, but you can pick up exactly what they need and what they want. And sometimes it's just a helping hand. Sometimes it's just somebody to take over, maybe processing payments for them, or going to get their bread, or something simple as that. Instead of trying to be there and find a solution in terms of extended family and planting more negative things and make it difficult for the immediate family, rather say, okay, how can I help in another way? Can I get you your bread? Can I come and visit you? Can I have a cup of tea with you? We don't have to say anything. Can I just have I'll come through. I'll bring a cake. We'll sit. We'll just talk. We'll talk. And you don't have to say anything, but just listen. Because sometimes by talking, you're making things worse.
You're absolutely right, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, if we can just listen, and listen compassionately, and not listening to give you a solution, but just listening to what your loved one has to say and really understand how they're feeling. If you can cultivate the ability to listen, to understand, and you can then feel what that other person is feeling, immediately compassion would arise from that. And immediately you're no longer going to point and say, but if you could just do this, and if you could just do that, you'll realize that it is so difficult for them to just do that or just do that. And so compassion arises from that. And the listening also then sort of creates an environment where a solution can actually, a good and proper solution can actually come out of it, because you now are essentially putting yourself in that person's shoes, and in that way you can then figure out, okay, the solution might not be as simple as just going to a psychologist, because again, based on the stigma of going to a psychologist. And so what could be a solution? Oh my word, if I can just listen to her and allow her or him to speak without any judgment, I know that'll benefit me, and if it'll benefit me, I know it'll benefit my loved one. And so just being able to put yourself in that other person's shoes and feel it. It shouldn't be an intellectual thing, it should be a feeling thing. You should be able to feel what that person is going through, and understanding them to the core of it, and unfortunately, I think we think that by us, we're obviously driven by solutions and we want to solve the issue, but in order to solve the issue, you have to first connect and feel and be able to see that person's perspective completely, and not for what we want it to be. I think that's a fantastic step. You know, if we can just all just do that.
That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Because I mean, every one of us goes through something. It can be something trivial, like I don't know, I can't even think of anything right now. But anything small that happens in your life, sometimes you just need somebody to talk to, a safe space. So for me, it would be my husband and my best friend and my mom. But my best friend is that completely outside person who's not going to try and offer a solution. She'll just listen. So my thing with her is after work, driving home, I'll have that long conversation with her, vent whatever needs to get out, and then I'm good for the day.
Yeah.
And she does the same. So we have that relationship where you can vent, you can say what you need to say, and you know, somebody's actually heard you. It's that weight off your chest, and okay, I can survive another day. I can go another day. I can carry on with my day.
Yeah.
Sometimes we all need that. There's people who don't have mental illnesses or anything. Sometimes it's just somebody to talk to.
And I think that also takes. That's a fantastic point. You know, for those of you who are struggling or needing to offload or speak to someone, get that friend, find that loved one, whoever it is that you can speak to openly and truthfully. And in saying that, it also takes a lot of courage to do that. It takes a lot of courage to say, you know what, I'm going to speak to you and I'm going to become quite vulnerable to you. And I would prefer and I would love for you just to, again, listen without any judgment. And so it's quite important who you speak to and who you offload on, because just depending on how much you trust that person. But what I want you to say is, so I'm looking at myself, for example, and I must be honest and saying that I don't really have too many people that and I actually do. I do have people that I can offload on, but I realize for me, the way that there's a lot of people externalize, and that's what I'm trying to get at, is when we need to vent, we externalize and, or we blame, or we say, you made me feel this way, or, you caused me to feel this particular way. And I think, and that's an okay way to deal with certain situations, but I think when we can and are able to internalize it, and when we're able to really understand it and deal with it within ourselves instead of taking it out on other people, that is even more powerful. But if you don't have that capacity to do that now, the best way to do it, or the good starting point, is to speak to that friend, to speak to that loved one. And I must say, even with me, there are times where I need to speak, and it's just too overwhelming for me, and then I will speak to my loved ones, and that definitely does help. But just to know that you do have the capacity to internalize it yourself, that you can soothe yourself, you have the ability to soothe yourself, to nourish yourself. And I think that's the ultimate liberation, is when you don't need, or you're not dependent on other people, you're only dependent on yourself. And because at the end of the day, we only have ourselves.
That's true.
We come in the world alone, and we are going to leave the world alone. So we really do only have ourselves. And so to really put yourself first, having the courage to put yourself first, loving yourself enough to be vulnerable with yourself, having the courage to speak your truth. I think that's so, so important, but it takes courage. And so I think, starting this conversation was quite important, and it's obviously going to be an ongoing conversation. It's not a small conversation at all, but I think just to, get the conversation going, and hopefully, igniting quite a bit of courage in a lot of people to continue the conversation and take the courage to speak their truth, whether to themselves or other people, it doesn't matter, but to speak it, I think, is quite important. Is there anything else before we close? Is there anything else that you would love to leave people with, or anything just from your experience and from your
I think I said it. I think I've tied it up in between there.
Perfect.
So what I've said has tied it up.
Yeah, and so guys, I think, just really speak your truth and have the courage to speak your truth. I think that's quite important. And if you don't have the courage, build the courage, and And it's not easy because I was there. I know what it feels like to not be able to turn to anyone, not because of anything else, but because of my own fears and my own insecurities and my own fears of they're going to judge me. But I urge you guys, if you can't speak to a loved one or close one around you, build the courage to speak to a life coach, to a psychologist, or seek help, because that is the best thing you can do for yourself. The minute you take action, there's always going to be a reciprocity in that regard. And so the minute you take action, there's going to be a reaction to that. So do something. Don't just sit. Don't just do nothing. That's the worst thing you can do. Do something. I do want to leave you all with this. So we are launching an online program called the Revive Your Lower Body program, and it's based on the idea of releasing certain body parts in the body to restore the length tension relationship and to get you to feel better. So we give you releases, muscle releases, we give you stretches, and we give you exercises to do to really build and to restore the lower body. I want you guys to check it out, and if you do feel that it is something for you, please, we welcome you to purchase our online product and send it to someone, send the link to someone that you think would benefit from it. But until the next one, guys, I hope you have a great day and stay in peace and not in pieces.